How we doing, Jets fans? I'm Glenn Naughton with Jet Nation Radio and JetNation.com. Be sure to log into JetNation.com where you can register and become a part of what is the most active Jets message board on the web. And once again, I am joined by Chris Schubert of the Draft Network. We are going to talk some Jets football. We are, of course, you can't go 10 minutes without talking about Aaron Rodgers. And of course, we're going to talk some draft prospects. So, Chris, as we were saying a little bit before we got started, the thing that surprises me most with the Aaron Rodgers situation is the number of fans who not only aren't appropriately considering the contract, they are completely ignoring the contract. And there are a lot Jets fans too. It's not just it's a lot of Packers fans, but I've seen Jets fans. What do you mean you don't want to give up a one? What do you mean you don't want to give up multiple twos? This is this is in my mind, and clearly I was encouraged to hear in Woody Johnson's mind too. There's a good chance it's a 1 year rental. There's a good chance you could end up paying Aaron Rodgers $100 million for one season. This is a guy that last won a Super Bowl 12 years ago. Matthew Stafford has won a Super Bowl more recently than Aaron Rodgers. If you want to come at me with the, but he has a ring argument, then go get the guy who won one 2 years ago for a mid-round pick. So what are your thoughts, Chris? How crazy this has gotten that people are only looking at the fact that he's a future Hall of Famer and they don't want to look at anything else?
Well, Glenn, when you and I first started talking about the idea of you and I doing something together on a pretty regular basis, I was thinking, oh, great, we can get into all the different roster things that the team should do. We could talk about the draft. Then when we get closer to training camp, we could talk about, positional battles. And I'm excited, right? Jets football came. It feels like we are going to talk about this until the end of time. I honestly don't know if I see the light at the end of the tunnel, Glenn. I really don't. I don't know when it's going to end. Listen, I just did a show about this earlier this week because the Charles Robinson reporting that he did when he went on an ESPN Wisconsin affiliate and talked about where he thinks things stood. I was pleasantly surprised to see him talk about the idea that Woody Johnson is the one that's holding this up. It's Woody Johnson that is saying, no, I don't want to give a first-round pickup because we don't know if he's going to play for this year. And I kind of threw cold water on the idea that the Jets flew out there, spent 8 hours with Aaron Rodgers, had a full-blown conversation with him, asked him what his plans were, asked him what his future looked like, asked him all these different questions, came back, and then were surprised a week plus later when he went on Pat McAfee and said, oh, I went into the darkness retreat 90% retired. I had a tough time believing that Joe Douglas, Robert Saleh, Nathaniel Hackett, Woody Johnson all went over there, and then yet were surprised when he said that. So that part of the story I have a tough time with. I will tell you, as a Jets fan, and we've talked about it here when we've been doing this show, the idea of Woody coming in over the top at some point saying, do it, get it done, do whatever it takes, to see that it's Woody Johnson, the one that's like, no, I'm not giving up a first-round pick. That's the most welcoming sign in the world to me. Well, I'll kick my feet up. I'll sit back, Woody. Woody, you do you, man. You just hold negotiations wherever you want them, man. I'm good. This is ultimately going to get done, because it is in everybody's best interest to get it done. And I'm sorry, you can try to all of a sudden flirt out the idea that, the 49ers might be interested in trading for Aaron Rodgers. Really? Okay. There have been plenty of opportunities for them to jump into this process. They're not. You are using the fact that the draft is 2 weeks from now and that those are the picks that you were trying to acquire from the Jets to kind of try to expedite things a little bit. Joe Douglas, the most tight-lipped general manager in all of football, with Boomer Esiason, says he's going to be here. Aaron Rodgers is going to be here. We're just going to have to wait, and that's okay.
Yeah, and I think that the fact that Woody, because a lot of people came at me, it's really funny because, I mean, I guess, of course, on Twitter, not everyone's familiar with your history and your thought process, but I've said for years that I hate the Woody Johnson conspiracy theories. Woody meddles, Woody does this, Woody does that.
Meddles on a scale that is totally different from other owners that meddle. We have it good here in New York with if what the Jets fans think is Woody meddling is actually Woody meddling.
Yeah, I think that he got involved with the Carr thing, and I'm not blaming him for that, even though I wanted Carr, and I believe, even before the report came out that Woody intervened with that, I said on this show, I said there's a good chance Woody got involved, because if it was my team and it was the biggest decision we've made in 5, 10, 15 years, I'd have something to say too. So I wasn't thrilled with that, but because I said that, there were a lot of people like, oh, you just hate Woody. I like Woody quite a bit. And this was the first time, or this wasn't the first time, but this is the first news we've heard of Woody intervening since the Carr story broke. And I was pleasantly surprised. I mean, I love the fact that Woody Johnson is the guy saying, we're not giving up a one for a guy who we don't know what we're getting out of in terms of the number of years. I even think a one, if you know you're getting 2 years, I think is too much. That needs to be, and I've said from the beginning of the process, give them a 3 or a 4 this year. This is when they still had the 3. and give him a conditional next year, because I'm not giving you a 1 for a guy who either doesn't play or who turns 41, 42, gets hurt and gives you 6 games. And we've seen it, and Rich Eisen referenced it today. I've heard, and many people have. Look at some of the recent deals. Look at the Russell Wilson situation, how that turned out for the Denver Broncos, giving up all that capital, thinking, well, we're getting Russell Wilson, so this is going to be pick 29 or pick 30 or maybe 32. Turns out it's pick 5. And so these things happen, and the fact that Woody's trying to get protection against it is awesome.
So I want to touch on one thing you said there, because Charles Robinson brought this same thing up, this idea that Woody apparently, a big thing for him is he saw the way the Russell Wilson thing went down, where Denver trades first round picks for Russell Wilson. It doesn't work out. Russ is still there. They've signed him to the contract, but now they don't have a first round pick to be able to go out and get and potentially get extra help or get, things to support Russ with. I'll do you one better. I'll take that exact scenario and play it out for the New York Jets. Let's say the New York Jets agree to a deal right now and give up a 2024 first round pick to the Green Bay Packers for Aaron Rodgers. And Aaron Rodgers, I don't know, after let's say 11 games or so, just picking a number out of thin air, after maybe an 8-3 start, I don't know, just guessing here, gets hurt and can't finish out the season. And the Jets kind of falter and they have a middling pick. Maybe not the pick we all thought they were going to have, picking in the late 20s, maybe into the 30s if they have a great season. And now they don't have a pick. And Aaron Rodgers says, you know what? I can't do this anymore. I'm beaten down. I got hurt. I missed the year. I don't want to be here anymore. I'm going to retire. I was 90% retired last year. I tried to give it another run outside of Green Bay, but I'm done. Well, now you don't have Aaron Rodgers. Now you don't have a first round pick, and a pick that you thought was going to be in the late 20s might be in the mid teens. And you now can't use that capital to go up and get a quarterback in next year's class, because this is the dirty little secret, everybody. Even if Aaron Rodgers is here for just one season and they're successful, when Rodgers retires, the Jets are going to have to figure out what their future quarterback situation is going to look like. Now, Glenn, I have a bit of an off-the-wall theory that I want to throw out at you. And I know you're going to hate this, and I know the listeners are going to hate this, but just hear me out before you tweet at me, okay? The best thing that could happen for the New York Jets is for a quarterback like C.J. Stroud or Will Levis to fall outside of the top 7. Because if a Will Levis or a C.J. Stroud is available at, let's say, 8 when Atlanta's picking, or 9 when Chicago's picking, or heck, maybe it gets to 11 and the Cardinals made a trade with Tennessee and Arizona's picking at 11, right? Let's say one of those quarterbacks is available and this Rodgers deal isn't done. We all agree that the New York Jets, at some point in their future, need to take another quarterback, right? I think there are people that don't think Zach's the long-term answer. They're going to keep Zach on the roster and hopefully he can develop into something. But I think a lot of people are ready to be done with Zach. And if the Jets feel their roster is ready to go with Aaron, they don't need to use the pick on a player, right? They don't need to use it. So what if they say, you know what? We really like Will Levis. Will Levis is our guy. We've done the evaluation. Joe's like, Will's my guy. And he moves up a couple spots and says, here you go, Green Bay. Here's your leverage. We're taking Will Levis with the 11th overall pick. Again, I don't think it's likely, but that would be a worst case scenario for Green Bay. If the Jets on draft night, a guy that they might actually love, falls further than they think, we know Joe loves to move up. He moves up and says, you know what? I can still get Aaron Rodgers, but I'm going to get the guy for the future. I'm going to get Will Levis. Will can sit the entire year. There's not a single Jet fan that's going to be like, oh, you got to play Will Levis over Aaron Rodgers. You can still get Aaron. And guess what? The Packers don't have any leverage anymore, because the Jets will be like, all right, we'll just roll with Will. Good luck. You can pay Aaron the $58.3 million. Do I think that's a likely scenario, a top of the list scenario? No, but I think it's more realistic than it was 6 weeks ago.
I'll tell you what, I do wonder, like I've said all along, like the Jets aren't taking a quarterback in round 1. They've already promised a veteran and all that stuff. I think if things fell apart with Rodgers,
they got Tim Boyle, Glenn. There's your veteran. They got Tim Boyle on the roster. It's okay.
They're going to pivot to either a Stafford or a Tannehill or somebody like that. But I think that the Packers even thinking that 13 should be on the table. I mean, they did say publicly, didn't they? Gutekunst or whatever said that it didn't have to be a 1, but apparently he meant this year, because it's next year that he's supposedly pushing for this 1. And it shouldn't even be on the table. The Jets are taking $100 million in debt off their hands. The Packers should be thrilled to be doing this deal. You can talk to me, oh, well, the Jets don't have a quarterback and they're getting Aaron Rodgers. They're getting 1 year of Aaron Rodgers, maybe 2. They're not getting a long-term answer at quarterback.
1 year of a 39, about to turn 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers, who's coming off one of the worst years of his career. Now, if you want to tell me that was because of the thumb, fine.
Right.
but he still had one of the worst years of his career. He's got a terrible contract. He's 39 years old. Again, I'm not trying to come on this show and say I don't want the Jets to get Aaron Rodgers. I feel like that's the best case scenario considering where we're at right now. But if you're going to tell me that the Jets are going to draft a Will Levis or a CJ Stroud at 13 or move up and then go out and trade for a Ryan Tannehill or Kirk Cousins, I can't say I would totally hate that. I don't know if I'd love it. I don't know how I'd feel about the status of the 2023 Jets, but it would be a good pivot. It would be them recognizing, okay, this isn't going to work out. Good luck, Green Bay. Figure it out.
And that
I wouldn't hate it.
Tell you what, it would be sort of cutting off your nose to spite your face. But there is a part of me that's like, I would love them to walk away from this and see what Green Bay does, because what do you do if you're Green Bay then? You then have a guy who's due $100 million. By 5 days after the Super Bowl, he's due $40 million. He's due $60 million before that. I've seen Packers fans suggest Rodgers might just rework his deal to be friendly before he retires. Like, why would he do that? What would his incentive be to say, I'm just going to, for no apparent reason, give up a bunch of money to not play before I retire? I think if the Packers don't deal him, he's not going to retire. He's not going to do them any favors. He's going to get his $100 million and leave.
So he won't do the Packers any favors, but he will do whatever team acquires him favors. He even said it as much on McAfee that he knows that his contract needs to be reworked. So the number is going to be different for whatever team gets him. But do we honestly, truly, do we believe that the hang up right now is that the Green Bay Packers and the New York Jets can't agree on what Aaron Rodgers' reworked contract is going to look like? Do we really think Aaron Rodgers is holding this up because he hasn't agreed to a reworked contract? No, this is being held up because the Packers are apparently steadfast in what they want. And Joe Douglas is like, no, thank you. Which again, I said it a month ago, tracks with everything we know about Joe. He is always willing to put a limit. He is always willing to be like, this is the stopgap for me. This is the last best offer that I've got for you. And so we'll see, because truly always part of the deal was going to be a 2023 pick. Well, guess what? When the Jets are on the clock on day 2 and this deal's not done and pick 42 rolls around, during those 10 minutes, you don't think Green Bay is going to be a little anxious?
Yeah, absolutely.
You don't think Green Bay is going to be a little anxious during pick 43 when those, I forget what the new timing is. I think it's only 5 minutes in round 2. When those 5 minutes are going down and they don't have a deal and the Jets make those selections. We did a mock draft this week over at the Draft Network. Peter Skoronski at 13. I don't really love it, but all right. Peter Skoronski at 13. And then at 42, Brian Branch. At 43, John Michael Schmitz. You know what? I'm good. I'll figure it out. We'll trade for Ryan Tannehill. We'll trade for Kirk Cousins. We'll figure out the quarterback situation. Because again, at that point, all of the leverage then pivots to the Jets. Because if the Jets go out and trade for Ryan Tannehill, what are the Packers going to do? They're just going to hold on to him and pay $58 million?
This is one of the points that we've gone over a few times is that
I don't want Ryan Tannehill for the record. I want Aaron Rodgers. I want to make it very clear, but I'm just saying this leverage game can play out poorly.
Yeah, Aaron Rodgers is clearly the better option, but this is the thing that Packers fans, for some reason, are unwilling to admit, is that while the Jets may have inferior options, they have options. The Packers don't. All this talk of there are mystery teams looking, no, there are not.
Okay.
What are they waiting for?
Call them up.
The draft is in 2 weeks. They're right. Talking about this like teams are respectfully waiting for the Jets to finish negotiating before they get involved. You don't do that. You want a guy, you dive in. This guy's been available for weeks.
You need a team that Aaron wants to go to, because if let's say the 49ers call up and they want Aaron Rodgers, but Aaron doesn't want to go there. Aaron goes,
he wouldn't.
Oh, you're going to trade me. You're going to trade me to San Francisco. You know what? That 90%, it's back to 100. I'm out. I'm going to retire and I'm going to stick you with the bill.
Yeah, and what he could do, basically, because I talked to Scott Mason about this one, and he made a really good point that he doesn't have a no trade clause in his deal, but all he has to say to any team trading for him that he doesn't want to go to, after you give me that $60 million, I'm going to retire, and there's nothing you can do about it. So you can trade for me and hand me $60 million to walk away, or you can just walk away and keep your $60 million, and no one's going to trade for him under those conditions.
If he is traded pre-June 1, he counts for $40.3 million in dead cap money for the Green Bay Packers. If he is traded post-June 1, it's 15.8.
Yeah.
There you go. That's why we're in the spot that we're in right now. The Green Bay Packers want to make the Jets sweat, and the Jets know how this all is going to play out. So to me, I would crank up the heat a little bit. Again, it all depends on if the Jets like one of these quarterbacks and the quarterback specifically is available. But you know what? I would not hate the idea of them taking one of the quarterbacks if they truly like the guy. If they wanted to trade up and get Anthony Richardson, I wouldn't hate it.
I'll tell you what, because I've been so steadfast in saying the Jets won't take a quarterback, I've watched a little bit of them, enough to get an idea for what I like about these guys. But I'll tell you, I watched some Anthony Richardson today. like most as closely as I've watched him, and I
Yeah.
was like, Jesus, like this guy is he's a phenom. Yet, yes, he's got holes. Yes, he
He's
misfires.
raw.
He
He's raw.
overthrows guys on deep balls. I get that, but the stuff he can do is like, how many guys on planet Earth can do that? Like,
Mm-hmm.
he might be one. Like, Josh Allen can run and throw. He can't run like Anthony Richardson. You know
No,
what I mean?
and
And
yeah,
Lamar
he's
Jackson can run
extremely
and throw, but
athletic.
he can't throw like Anthony Richardson.
He's
So
extremely athletic, extremely athletic.
and some of the lasers he's throwing on the move, like he's throwing balls on the move that a lot of guys can't throw with that type of velocity standing, standing in the pocket and standing, stationary.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's a whole different conversation. But we'll see. I think that's enough for the Aaron saga for now. But you mentioned Brian Branch. I'm glad you did because I wanted to talk about the safety position for the Jets. I really
Oh,
think it was a letdown last year. I think Jordan Whitehead, coming into the offseason, I said maybe he's a cap casualty, 8 million savings, whatever it is. But it looks like he's staying. You can't overhaul everybody in one year. They're hoping for a bounce back. But he had a lot of missed tackles last year, a lot of big plays that the safeties allowed. Of course, they brought in Chuck Clark. It looks like he'll be back there pretty regularly. I think they like Tony Adams more than people realize.
hmm.
Maybe because I like Tony Adams more than most people do. But there is a part of me that wonders if they're looking at their safety room and saying, you know what, Tony's going to be our guy next year. Tony and Clark and Whitehead, we're going to go with them. But do you use a pick? I mean, you said you'd be happy with Branch. You would take a safety that early, or do you think that they might like what they have?
Not at 13. No, I don't think Brian Branch
Oh no,
or
no, not a 13. Because
or
you said
Antonio
at
Johnson.
22, I think they.
Yeah, in the second round, I think it's much more value appropriate for these safeties. There are some people who think Brian would have to play corner at the NFL level and can't play safety or can kind of be a hybrid guy at that position.
Right.
But you mentioned Chuck Clark, and they kind of brought him in. What a steal for Joe Douglas. Trades a 7th-round pick for a guy that's a leader, that's a defensive leader that comes from Baltimore, where Joe comes from, so he knows what type of locker room guy he's going to be, and ultimately a guy that's a pretty good tackler, right? And that's what the Jets. Plays all over the place, but what the Jets were missing from their safety group last year was consistent tackling. Right, it was the big thing with Jordan. The pursuit angles to tackles were bad. Some of the way he tried to tackle was bad. And again, that's not the player that the Jets signed from Tampa Bay. And so you think that the Jets' approach to this offseason was, okay, we're going to go out and get a veteran in Chuck Clark, who was just a cap casualty for another team. We can get him on the cheap. We basically beat everybody that was going to try to sign him in free agency by giving up the 7th-round pick. So we get a guy that can help us in that regard, and we believe in a Jordan Whitehead bounce-back season. So I think they'll add an additional safety in the draft. Will it be with one of those 2 second-round picks? Maybe, maybe not. I think it's more likely they'll use a day 3 pick in that regard. So I don't like this group at all, really. I mean, Branch and Johnson are interesting to me, but after that, you got a lot of question marks. Jamie Robinson, the size, JL Skinner, I worry about. He's got length, but I don't know how much of it's good length. He's extremely skinny, and that concerns me a little bit. So I don't know if he's going to be able to be physical enough at the next level. So it's a group that I wouldn't want to have as a thing that I need to address in the draft because I don't love it in comparison to some of the other position groups.
Yeah, I've kind of touted Jason Taylor II a couple times as sort of a day 3 pick. Some feel he may be a UDFA, but he's a guy who made a ton of plays in college. Good ball skills, good timing. Made big plays at the right time. So we'll see if he's a factor. But I feel like they have to make a move at safety. But with the number of picks they have, they're not. Unless there are trade downs or there may be some guys they have on the roster that they think they can move for a day 3 pick, and maybe they do that. But sitting where they are now, I feel like there are enough needs that the likelihood of taking a safety that early are unlikely. But we'll see how that plays out. But the defense as a whole, a big storyline last year, and I feel like I understand why people were saying it, but I also feel like it was unfair to the Jets. Everyone talked about, well, they had this great defensive ranking, but look at how many backup quarterbacks they faced. Like, I'm sure that helped, but if not for the fact they shut down Josh Allen. Like they basically you go through the game logs. You look at whether it was Trevor Lawrence or Jared Goff, the starters they did face. None of them performed to their normal level against this Jets defense. Like they all had some of their worst games against the Jets. So it's not as if the Jets faced 11 backups and then got torched by the starters they faced. Like they shut down some good offenses.
How did future Jet quarterback Aaron Rodgers do when he played the New York Jets defense? Trevor Lawrence, everybody's darling, had a great, comeback in the playoffs. How did he do against the Jets defense?
Right.
I mean, again, there's criticisms to be had on this defense. It just wouldn't be that they played backup quarterbacks. It would be the way that they finished the season. It would be some of the letdowns late in games against teams like Detroit, against teams like Minnesota, games that they should have. They should have won that would have absolutely dramatically changed how successful of a season it would have been for them. That would be my biggest takeaway on the defensive side of things, is that they just got to finish the job. They got to finish all 4 quarters. Listen, go look at the schedule for 2023. You're going to get your answer. If you truly believe that it was because the Jets played a bunch of backup quarterbacks, okay, well, you're going to find out very, very quickly based on the schedule that the Jets have if that's true or not. I don't necessarily believe it. I do think they need to be better. I think there was a big movement amongst New York media to anoint this team as one of the best defenses in the league, a top 3 defense, potentially the best defense in the league. And I think a lot of that had to do with how good Sauce and DJ played. But I'm still skeptical of this being a top 5 defense in the league. They struggled in some key areas late in the season that need to be better. They got to get better at linebacker. They got to be better at finishing out games. They've got to get a more consistent pass rush outside of Q. They just need Carl Lawson to be better. Jermaine Johnson's got to dial up and be in the rotation a little bit more. Want to see more from Michael Clemens. I mean, they've got areas, safety we just talked about. They need to be better. They're a great defense. They were very good last year, but they can be better. They can be a better group than they were a year ago. And to me, even if Aaron Rodgers is here or not, that's the group that's going to carry them. Because if that group goes, they're going to struggle. They got to play the Bills twice. They got to play the Dolphins twice. They've got, I think, Kansas City on their schedule.
Mhm.
They've got, I think, Philly on their schedule.
Yep.
I think they've got the Chargers on their schedule. They've got such a brutal schedule in terms of the teams that they're going to play from a quarterback perspective. I'm pulling it up just to make sure I don't forget any of the big teams that they need to play. But they got Kansas City, the Chargers, Philly. They got to go to Cleveland, Buffalo twice, like I mentioned. They got to go to Denver again. Like if Russ is good, that's going to be a problem too. So they are going to be tested in a big way, and this defense is going to really carry them, I think, in 2023.
Yeah, I think you're right, and that's something that we commented on our show throughout the year, that it felt like the pressure Quinnen was getting up front and the play from the corners on the outside is what was carrying this defense.
Can I get a Q contract extension, please? Please.
The longer
We're
they
not-
wait, the longer
We're not talking about it. Jeffrey Simmons just got the bag, a lot of money, and that
every time
look at
somebody
that
gets
deal.
paid, yep, Quinnen is just smiling ear to ear every time someone gets a deal, because he's going to
Please.
ask for the biggest deal, and rightfully
Give him
so.
whatever he wants, but please get it done sooner rather than later. I don't want to stress, because you know what's going to happen if trading camp opens up and this isn't a done deal. It's going to be a question every single day until it's done, and rightly so.
He's not showing up.
Okay, well, we don't need that. We don't need that. Get this deal done with Q, please.
It's surprising to me that they're dragging their feet on it. Who knows what happened. That's another thing with the Aaron Rodgers thing. Not to go back to it, but some people have, since Joe made those comments publicly that Aaron is coming. I thought that was foolish. I think you keep that in house. I get, maybe he was having a good time in front of some friendly fans, and maybe he had a couple with Boomer and they were having a good laugh. I think saying that kind of puts him under that much more pressure. But people were saying to me, well, obviously the deal is done. Like, he wouldn't say that if the deal wasn't already done. The league has asked the Jets and Packers to sit on it so the story can stay in the news.
All right, well, that's ridiculous. Yeah, that's ridiculous.
So the Jets would hold off on being able to bring in Aaron Rodgers and move his money around and create more space to add more guys just to keep the story in the news cycle. Like, people just believe what they want to believe, and they come up with whatever reasons they have to come up with to make it make sense, even though that doesn't. But the number of people I had tell me, like, oh, dude, you're such an idiot. How can you not see this deal is already done? Because if Aaron Rodgers breaks his leg tomorrow, the Jets ain't picking up his salary. That's how I know the deal isn't done. Like, what are you talking about? So, right. but again, people are just kind of telling themselves what they want to hear. But I think I share a lot of your concerns with the defense. I think they did do a really nice job last year. I do worry, I understand, CJ Mosley had 10 million tackles, but I do worry about his speed in the middle of the field and teams exposing that.
Worst Pro Bowl selection ever in the history of Pro Bowl selections. I'm sorry, but CJ should not have been a Pro Bowler last year.
It was, like I said, the tackle numbers were there, but the impact plays weren't. And he's a guy that I think teams are going to exploit in the middle even more next year in the passing game.
Couldn't cover very well. Could not cover very well at all.
And that's the thing. And look, you can't listen. The guy, he's getting long on the tooth. They've given him a bunch of money, so they're going to let him hang around. And then one question that I've raised, and we'll find out come draft time. And actually, which brings me to the last question I want to ask you before you go, or before we go, is. We've talked about how they have to get a linebacker, middle linebacker. But I asked, kind of was thinking aloud a couple of weeks ago and said, well, I wonder, maybe they like Jamie and Sherwood more than we realize. He's a guy they moved to linebacker, played safety, can cover a little bit. And we just didn't see much of him last year because they're loyal to CJ and he stayed healthy. But if they like him, if they don't, The question I was going to ask is how early do you think? Because I know you guys do your mocks all the time. You and I talked about how much we would love the idea of drafting Dan Henley.
Mhm.
Jets had him in for a visit, which was great news. Do you see him as a guy who goes in round 2, or do you see him as a round 3 guy where the Jets don't have a pick at the moment?
Specifically where the Jets pick, it might be a little rich. But I also don't know how the league's going to view this class, right? I think Trenton Simpson's a really good player, very good sideline to sideline. He's got great speed in that regard to be able to cover that length of field. Daion's also really good at that. That's why I like Daion a ton. I think he's physical. I think he can help in the run game, and I think he's got that sideline to sideline speed that can help you cover in the passing game. I think he's more of a round 3 guy. But there are other players. I mentioned Henry To'oTo'o here in the past that I think he's kind of that guy that's not getting talked about enough that could be at that position. I will tell you this, Glenn. I think there are going to be linebackers on the board for the Jets when they pick at 42 or 43. Whether that's a Jack Campbell, whether it's a Drew Sanders, whether it's a Trenton Simpson, whether it's a Henry To'oTo'o, whether it's a Daion Henley. I mean, I think these guys are going to be available, right? I don't think a linebacker is going to go in the first round. I think they would go early on day 2, more than likely. And so there are going to be guys available. It's just, do the Jets feel it's a priority? Do the Jets feel like it's something they need to address? And do the guys that they like are they still on the board when they pick?
All right, Chris Schubert of the Draft Network. Thanks so much, Chris. We got one more show before the draft. Might run a little bit longer for that one. Limited on time tonight, but thanks so much. And hopefully we can get this damn Aaron Rodgers story behind us and get this deal to happen.
I fully expect that the show that we do after the draft will not start with an actual discussion of what the Jets did in the draft. It will start with the discussion about Aaron Rodgers. Guaranteed.
All right, we shall see. Have a good one. Thanks for joining us, folks.